Right now in Nepal, there's this huge debate going on, and it really gets to the very heart of how the country is governed. It's a conversation that's being driven by years of frustration, but it also presents this really profound choice about what kind of democracy Nepal wants to be.
Okay, so let's just jump right into the core of the problem with a single number, 14. That's the number of different governments Nepal has had since it became a republic back in 2008. I mean, just let that sink in for a second. That's a new government on average almost every single year.
And you can imagine, right? This constant, relentless churn is exactly why there's this growing, really powerful call for some kind of radical change. People are just plain tired of the instability, and they're looking for an answer.
Yeah. This feeling of a revolving door government, where leaders spend more time just trying to hold on to power than actually governing, has created this deep frustration with the whole system. And that frustration, that's the engine driving this whole push for something completely different.
So, what's the big idea that's getting so much attention, especially with the newer political movements and a lot of younger people? It's this, a directly elected prime minister. So let's break down why this seemingly simple idea has become so appealing. And this slide just lays it all out, doesn't it? On one side, you have how people see the current system, just constant instability, fragile coalitions propped up by backroom deals, and nothing ever getting done because of policy gridlock. And on the other side, the promise of the new system, stability, a clear mandate right from the people, and the power to take decisive action. It's a really compelling pitch.
So the thinking goes like this. A directly elected leader, safe in a fixed term, could finally break this cycle of chaos. They'd have a clear line of accountability straight to the public, not to a bunch of shaky coalition partners. And this stability, they argue, would mean better governance, less corruption, and, this is a big one, the chance to actually finish long-term development projects instead of having them scrapped every time a new government comes in. Okay, but, and this is a big but, here's where the whole debate gets way more complicated. Critics are sounding the alarm, basically saying, what if this cure is actually worse than the disease? What are the profound risks of putting so much power into the hands of just one person?
Before we even get into all those risks, there's a huge practical question we have to ask. How hard would it even be to make this change happen? Well, the short answer is incredibly hard.
And yeah, take a look at this. This shows you the mountain they have to climb. Changing Nepal's constitution is not a simple vote. You need a 2/3 supermajority in both houses of the federal parliament, and then it has to be approved by at least 2/3 of the provincial assemblies too. In the kind of fragmented political world Nepal has today, getting that kind of agreement is, well, it's a monumental task, maybe even an impossible one.
But let's just say, for the sake of argument, they could pull it off. Opponents are pointing to three massive dangers. First, the very real risk of creating an authoritarian leader, someone who uses their popular vote as a weapon to just steamroll over other democratic institutions. Second, that a super powerful central leader could weaken Nepal's federal system and sideline its many minority groups. And third, what might be the nightmare scenario, a directly elected PM from one party facing a parliament controlled by another, leading to complete and total gridlock. Nothing gets done.
And look, these aren't just some academic fears. Critics point to other countries where this exact system has been tried, and the results, well, they're pretty cautionary. So let's see what lessons we can learn from what's happened abroad. Take Israel, for example. Back in the 90s, they had the same problem, super unstable coalition governments. So in 92, they switched to directly electing their prime minister, hoping it would bring stability. The result? The exact opposite. It actually led to more political fragmentation because people started splitting their votes. By 2001, the whole thing was seen as a total failure, and they repealed the reform completely.
And then you've got Sri Lanka. Its powerful executive presidency was specifically set up to create stability, to rise above the whims and fancies of parliament. But what critics say has happened over the decades is that it's concentrated way too much power in that one office, leading to authoritarian tendencies and a slow chipping away of democratic checks and balances. It's a pretty stark warning. Now, let's talk about one of the biggest selling points for this whole idea. Proponents claim that a strong, directly elected leader could finally tackle corruption head-on, free from all the horse trading and deal-making of coalition politics. It's a really powerful argument that hits home with people who are just fed up with scandals.
But what does the evidence from around the world actually say about that?
Well, this is pretty interesting, actually. Studies that have looked at this across different countries tell a different story. One major analysis found that Generally speaking, presidential systems, which are pretty similar to what's being proposed, tend to be more corrupt, not less. The theory behind it is that a prime minister who always needs the support of parliament to survive has more checks on their power. But a president with fewer constraints can become a kind of de facto elected dictator, which creates way more opportunities for corruption to thrive.
So, when you strip everything else away, what's the fundamental choice that Nepal is facing right now? It's a decision that has absolutely massive stakes for the future of the entire country.
At the end of the day, it really boils down to this fundamental trade-off. On one hand, you have the incredibly attractive promise of stability, a government that can finally make decisions, see policies through, and is clearly accountable to the people. But on the other hand, you have a profound risk to the very core of its democracy, the potential for an authoritarian leader, a paralyzed government, and the voices of the country's diverse minority groups getting lost.
And that leaves us with the one question at the heart of this whole debate, a question that, really, every citizen in Nepal has to grapple with. Is the promise of a stable, decisive government worth the gamble of potentially weakening the very democratic institutions that were so hard to win in the first place? There really is no easy answer.